Hey everyone, it's Mark Ferguson with Invest for More, and welcome to another one of my real estate investing videos. I am trying out my new studio in my new office. It sounds a little echoey right now, so we'll see how this recording comes out. As you can see, we put the cool little logo for Invest for More behind me. That's my blog where you can find 500 free articles, 150 podcast episodes, lots of great information, our books, all kinds of good stuff there for real estate investing. So today I'm going to talk about the housing crash that may or not be coming, and if it does come, what you can do as a real estate investor to protect yourself. I have a lot of opinions on the housing market. I've been an agent, investor, broker since 2001, 2002. So I went through the ups before the last crash, the downs, and now back up again to a good market. So I've seen a lot of what's going on. I have a lot of opinions about what might happen in the future. I can't predict for sure what will happen, but there are a lot of things that I think will affect our market. So first off, I may be one of the few people who does not think a crash is imminently coming. I think a slowdown can happen. I think prices could drop some. I do not see a crash coming like we had 10 years ago or anything close to it for a number of reasons. So I'm going to talk about that first. Why I don't think we're going to have a crash. Then I'll talk about what you can do in case we do have a crash, because we want to be prepared and protect ourselves either way. So the first thing to look at is what happened in the last crash. And really what it was horrible lending guidelines and overbuilding. Lenders were giving loans to anybody. They gave a loan to me. I was 22 years old, got a stated income loan, was a real estate agent. I didn't even have to show them my tax returns. I got a loan for $190,000. I didn't foreclose, I didn't lose my house, I was fine, but that's how a lot of loans were done, just giving loans out to everybody. There were 120% loan to value loans given out to people. That means if you bought a house for $200,000, you could get a loan for $240,000. It was insane what they were doing. And because so many people could get loans, they built tons of houses. They just kept building. So they thought, hey, everybody can buy a house. We'll just keep building and everyone will be happy. Well, eventually it all crumbled down. The Wall Street realized they were buying horrible loans. They're going to foreclosure. People couldn't make their payments. And then nobody could buy the new houses. And the two effects just destroyed the housing market. One of the worst crashes we've had. And looking at the statistics, prices went down 29% across the entire United States from the peak to the bottom after that crash. A lot of people say, oh, 40% drop, 50% drop. That did happen in certain areas like California, Arizona, Las Vegas, but not everywhere. Some places in the Midwest didn't see big drops. So the overall average in the entire United States was about a 29% housing price drop, which is a big deal. That's a lot of money. So why do I think things are different now? Well, first off, they are not overbuilding. In fact, they are still not even building at historic averages. So I have my little statistics here. Around 2006, 2007, there are 2.2 million housing starts in the United States. Now that wasn't a record, but that was pretty high, one of the highest points of building in the history of the US. When the housing crash hit, a year, 2 years later, that went down to 500,000 houses. So 75% drop in building. Nobody was building. And that lasted until 2012 before it started to creep up. And at 500,000 housing starts a year, that was the lowest it ever been in the last 80 years. And maybe longer than that, but the graphs I could see only went back 80 years. By far the lowest. And it just didn't happen 1 year, it happened 3 or 4 years. We had record low housing starts. It's slowly crept up to right now, it's about 1.2 million housing starts a year. That's still below average. So we're about half of what they were building before the last crash. We're below average, and we've had basically 10 years of either record low building or below average building housing starts every year. So if you want to know why the market is so crazy and why housing prices have increased so much, it's because they're not building. Population keeps increasing, and there aren't enough houses for everyone out there. That's why housing prices are going up. Before it was bad lending guidelines, everyone could buy a house. Now there aren't houses, two completely different things. Something else to consider are the loans. We've talked about that. People saying, oh, subprime lending's back. You can get low credit loans, no money down loans. It's all happening again. Here we go again. First off, there's been low, no money down loans for decades, since World War II. Actually, since before World War II. FHA, I think, was started right after the Great Depression. Been around a really long time. We don't have housing crashes all the time. Low money down loans do not cause housing crashes. Second, there are some subprime loans out there. Subprime basically means if your credit score is below 620 and you can get a loan, it's a subprime loan. They charge more interest, you're higher risk. There were a lot of subprime loans before the last crash. This time around, there are almost zero. Yes, lenders advertise they can do it, but almost no one is actually doing it. Very few, less than 1% of loans are subprime loans. It's just not the same, thing we had going on as before. Much more cash. Investors cannot get 0 down loans or 5% down loans like they could before the crash. They're putting 20% down, 25% down. It's an entirely different environment for lending. Much stricter, much safer. It is not this house of cards going to come tumbling down like it was before. It's built on much different guidelines. Something else that you hear over and over again is affordability. Hey, prices are going up so high, people can't afford it, it has to crash. And I can understand that point. There is some validity to it. However, housing in the US is not that unaffordable. It is compared to after the crash when prices were dirt cheap. That was one of the most affordable times in the history of the US. Houses were cheaper, interest rates were lower. That was one of the best times ever to buy a house. So if we compare it to that time, yes, things are unaffordable. But historically, they're slightly more affordable than average, but not crazy unaffordable. Now, some towns may seem like that. San Francisco, sure, but as the US as a whole is not crazy unaffordable. And if you look at other countries, Canada, Britain, Australia, they have housing markets that are way less affordable in the US, and they have not had crashes. Australia has had less affordable housing for the last 30 years than the United States. They never had a major crash. So yes, affordability can affect the market, but housing affordability alone will not cause a housing crash. Australia has shown that. I know we're different markets. I know lots of different variables there, but just for that one point of affordability doesn't mean we're going to have a crash. All right, finally, the last thing I want to talk about is I keep hearing every 10 years we have a housing crash. It's time. It's been 10 years. We have to have a housing crash. That's not true either. It may be that we have recessions every 10 years, but housing crashes do not happen every recession. In fact, I've got my little data here from a Harvard study that showed when the peaks were in the last housing markets and when those occurred. And so starting from now going back, 10 years ago was a peak, 18 years before that, 10 years before that, 7 years before that, 44 years before that, 11 years, 25 years, 20 years, 16 years, 20 years, 18 years. And what this study found was there's a peak in the housing market basically every 18 years. There were some anomalies in there, like World War II, that's where the 44-year span was. But basically, every 18 years going back to the year 1800, the United States, it averages there's a housing peak. So this whole idea that the housing market crashes every 10 years, completely false. And this idea that the housing market peaks every 18 years, on average, yes. But again, sometimes it happens 10 years, sometimes it happens 25 years, 44 years. You can't base the market on historic averages. There's too many variables, too many things going on. The world does not work on a timer, and every 10 years the economy crashes, or every 18 years the housing market crashes. There's too many other things going on. That's something else that just, it's great to know. Maybe it helps us get an idea of how long some cycles might last, but you can't say, oh, it's got to happen. It's been 10 years, automatic housing crash. It doesn't work that way. So based on all that information, a lot of other information, I don't think we're going to have a housing crash anytime soon. In fact, based on the 18-year rule, we'd have a housing crash in 2024. That's 6 years away. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying too many things to look at to know what will happen. I could see a slowdown. I could see prices level off. I could even see some price decreases. But I do not see a crash coming. I also did another video, another article on this that I'll link to and show you. But just because prices are high, just because it's a little unaffordable, does not mean a crash is coming. There's no building. There's so many investors out there ready to buy up houses if they get cheap, including giant hedge funds with billions of dollars. Even if there was a downturn, I think those properties would get snatched up before we drop too far. All right, having said all that, what happens if there is a crash? What happens if you're buying rentals, buying flips, and the market tanks? I have 20 rental properties now. I flipped 26 houses last year. I have 19 flips going right now. We just sold one today. So I am very exposed to the real estate market. Lots of properties, lots of flips. Am I going to go bankrupt if everything goes downhill? Something else I want to bring up, statistic I have, is so many people think that every investor went bankrupt during the last crash. Everyone got wiped out. No one made money. And I did some research on that for another article and talk about how many investors went bankrupt. And the statistics show that from 2004 to 2007, about 7% of non-owner occupied loans went into foreclosure. That's 1 out of 14 houses. That was from the time the loan was taken out until 2011, went into foreclosure from investors during the crash. So 7%, that's not that many. And when you consider that 2004 to 2007 was the time period for the riskiest, craziest loans being given out there, that really was not too crazy. I mean, there's a lot of investors who bought stuff before then, lots of investors who were buying stuff kind of on the downturn. Just because you're an investor and you went through the housing crash does not mean you went bankrupt and lost all your money. And something else you have to consider too is when we look at this 29% decrease, or people talking about how bad the crash was, they're talking about from the very peak to the very bottom. And the chances are you're not going to buy at the very peak, you'll buy before or after, and you don't have to sell at the very bottom either. You can ride things out. And that's the first thing I want to talk about. If you have rental properties, one of the first things you should make sure you're doing is you're making money on them every month. They're cash flowing. I never buy properties and hope they go up in value to make my money. I buy properties so they make money every month, so the tax advantages, they're paying down my loans, and I get a great deal on it too. So if I buy a house for $100,000, I know it's probably worth $140,000 or $150,000 at that time. I have built-in equity because I take the time and effort to get a great deal. So if you want to protect yourself from a crash, and you have rentals, 1, always buy below market value. 2, always have plenty of cash flow. And just because values decrease, it does not mean your rents will decrease. In the last crash, rents did decrease some, but not nearly as much as prices did. In some areas, rents stayed the same. As long as you held on to your properties and kept them rented, you are fine. If you would have kept them through the crash and until now, you'd be much better off. Even if you bought at the peak, in some markets it may be different, but in Colorado, if you would have bought at the peak before the crash, went through the crash, kept your property, you'd be golden right now. You'd have a ton of equity, made money the whole time with rents. It would have been great. So you don't have to sell when properties crash, when the market crashes. You should be making money every month, and you should be buying below market value. So you have that built-in equity. So even if the market does crash, you might still have equity, and if emergency comes up, you can sell it. That's some ways to protect yourself. It's basically investing the right way. And that's why not every investor went bankrupt and lost their houses to foreclosure in the last crash, because many of them bought rentals the right way. They weren't over leveraged. They were making money, and they just rode out the storm. Now with flippers, you heard a lot of information on how flippers went bankrupt, lost all this money. That is true too. However, we have to realize that before the last housing crash, there were all these crazy loans being given out. 100% loan to value for investors. People just bought houses and hoped they'd go up in value in 6 months and then sell them. They weren't making repairs. They weren't buying great deals. It wasn't even house flipping. It was speculation. And that is not happening now because of the loan guidelines. But it was such a completely crazy market. Prices were going up so high back then. People were speculating, buying, waiting, then selling. That's not what I do. I flipped before, during, and after the housing crash. I never did that. I always bought really good deals, made repairs, improved the house, and sold it. And how did we survive the last housing crash? Well, it wasn't terribly difficult. We got really good deals, repaired the houses, and sold them. We did that usually in 6 months or less. and we weren't exposed to the market that long because we sold houses quickly. Now, I never ever counted on the market to go up to make money. Right now, I see people paying more and more for flips. I won't do it. I'm not going to pay more assuming the market's going to go up in price. Except I still want the same cushion, the same profit margin I would have in a good market, in a down market, because I have to protect myself in case things do slow down. So you have to be smart. You can't get caught up in the rush. The wholesaler's telling you have to pay more money because the market's so strong. You have to stick to your numbers. Make sure you're getting products done quickly and fast, and you're not overexposing yourself to the market. So it's not rocket science. It's really nothing special to protect yourself in a down market. It's basically sticking to the fundamentals, investing wisely like you would in a regular market, and not getting caught up in the rising prices, the hot market. Yes, some of my properties have sold for much more than I thought they would when I bought them. That's bonus money. That's what I think of that. It's not something I expect or plan for or count on. That is bonus money. The opposite could happen. Prices could start going down. And the longer you hold a property, the worse off you'll be. All right, that's all I've got for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. We'll have many more coming. Selling some more houses soon. Have some more houses fixed up soon. We'll show videos of those. We'll have more real estate investing videos. And we're having our grand opening at the new office, Blue Steel Real Estate, this coming week. So that'll be amazing as well. Well, thank you guys for watching. Hope you give us a thumbs up. Leave a comment if you have a question. And we'll talk to you soon.